Greetings everybody, Redbeard here with another edition of Rasslin with Redbeard, the YouTube show where I, Redbeard, take you to a professional wrestling event somewhere in or around the Carolinas to give you a sense for what it's like to be a fan in pursuit of the great passion that is professional wrestling. I find myself this evening in Concord, North Carolina for TNA Wrestling's 2015 Bound for Glory pay-per-view. This is a big event here this evening. We've got a lot of talent here. It's a major deal for TNA because this is supposedly their biggest event of the year annually, kind of their WrestleMania, if you will. This is, I will go ahead and say, a long haul up here for me. This was a 2.5, almost 3-hour drive up here from St. Matthews, South Carolina, which is our base of operations, coming through a batch of weather and circumstances that I probably really shouldn't have driven through. If you don't know, this is October 4th, 2015 when this is being recorded, and at this point in time there is the remnant of Hurricane Joaquin sitting off the coast of North Carolina. At this point in time, it has led to major flooding in the Midlands of South Carolina, where I am from. There's a lot of damage, a lot of things that are going on in that part of the world right now. The areas that I had to drive through to get here were not really part of the major flooding that's been hitting that part of the world, but it was still somewhat stressful getting up here. I will say that when you hit North Carolina, it seems like everything gets worse, no matter what you've driven through by that point in time. Charlotte and everything north of that particular area just seems like it's a real hassle to get through. So maybe a long time before I come to North Carolina again for a wrestling event, or for any event for that matter, just by virtue of the stress level that's involved in getting up here. Along those same lines, I will add that this was promoted by TNA as being in Charlotte, North Carolina. This is definitely not Charlotte. This is almost in the middle of BFE, to be honest with you, because this is kind of listed as being in Cabarrus County. It's well, it definitely is in Cabarrus County, but it's listed officially as being in Concord, North Carolina. This is about 30, almost 40 miles removed from Charlotte. So if you thought, if you were a fan who didn't know where this particular venue was, like myself, and you were reading the information online about what was going on with this show, you might have thought, oh, well, we're going to Charlotte. No, you're not going to Charlotte. You're going way, way, way out in the middle of nowhere. That was what surprised me as we were coming into the venue here this evening, as we kept driving and driving and driving, and you get further and further away from civilization, and you wind up pretty much where we are now. That having been said, it appears to be a very nice venue. It must be in order to accommodate an event like this. But I tell you what, it's been something of a ordeal getting here, like I mentioned. I don't want to harp on that too much, but that's been the major part of my experience in being a part of this show, and that's what I try and convey through this particular program with you guys, is to give you my experience. But the crowd is starting to file in here. I have been seeing some rumors throughout the day today that this event is nowhere near sold out, apparently. They evidently were trying to get people to come by distributing tickets around the community and whatnot. Saw a few people on Twitter who were actually posting pictures of things that were left on their windshields at some of the local businesses in this area. So if you were lucky enough to get your ticket for free, good for you. I paid for mine. Yep, I paid for it. This was after they, of course, did a $5 discount a week or two ago, and have been giving the things away for free here this evening. So it makes me feel real good about having put money into this particular effort. This is the first pay-per-view that I've attended in quite some time. The last pay-per-view that I went to was the 2003 Unforgiven pay-per-view, which was in Charlotte, North Carolina. That actually was in Charlotte, North Carolina. That was at the Charlotte Coliseum, a venue which unfortunately no longer exists. That was a fun show. That was a nice building. They unfortunately tore it down here within the past 10 or 15 years to make way for the Uptown Arena that's in Charlotte. What I don't understand about the local scene is that there's been somewhat of a shift towards eastern North Carolina, with Winston-Salem and areas like that have gotten a lot of really great shows. And it's made me envious, because not that we don't get good stuff in South Carolina, but it's a long haul to get to any of those things, and I can't justify it. I can barely justify going to this. But be that as it may, the scene is hot. A lot of good talent around this area. As I mentioned, Andrew Everett and Trevor Lee are on the card here this evening. There may be some preliminary matches, because this thing is supposed to, according to the ticket anyway, it kicks off at 7:30, which is in about 15 minutes. But there may be some preliminary matches with some talent from around the region. leading up to the pay-per-view broadcast itself. We'll hopefully be able to get in time for that. But as I said, this is an event. We're going to make the best of it in spite of the weather, in spite of the long haul that it took to get up here and everything else. And we're hopefully going to have some fun with this show and maybe get some good footage and who knows, maybe document one of the final ever programs by TNA Wrestling. So it is what it is. I feel like I said a lot. My mouth is parched. I'm going to enjoy what's left of my Diet Mountain Dew here and then head inside. We'll see you there. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing great, thank you.
You got a shrunken ticket. Honey, quite honestly, I don't know any of these wrestlers.
Thank you.
Thank you, have a good time.
All right.
Well, folks, as you can see, I am back at our base of operations here at Rasslin Redbeard HQ, otherwise known as our home. Did not stay around for the entire show. Left after 3 matches. Left after the tag team championship match there between the Wolves and Trevor Lee and Brian Myers. Reason being, the show was not really doing a whole lot for me, and quite frankly, the threat of inclement weather and the conditions were enough to go ahead and send me back home. Do not regret having made the trip, but I will say that in terms of this particular episode of Rasslin with Redbeard, we're probably not going to release it as number 20, as that's what we're up to now. This is likely going to go down as the lost episode, because we, of course, did shoot this material. We did make an effort to cover the event, but I don't think we really lived up to our traditional expectations, at least not my expectations for this program. In regard to my travels along the road, and not only this particular effort with Rasslin with Redbeard, but in a lot of our road trips, Jill and I, we go through our typical favorite beverages and whatnot, and some of our favorite roadside snacks are various brands of jerky. Stopped at a gas station to fuel up as I was leaving North Carolina, and picked up a couple of these. It's, as you can see, Jack Link's original beef stick, supersize. Yeah, this was more convenient than actually stopping for a sandwich or whatnot. This, I imagine, is what dog food tastes like. I have to say that because of the fact that I ate one of these things, and it has the meaty, fatty texture that you would expect from a beef stick, but the flavor of this particular brand is totally wretched. I'll go ahead and say it. I will admit to never having had this brand before. I typically am more of a Slim Jim or a Squatch variety type person. These, as you can see, this one is unopened. I had 2 of them, and I ate the first one and didn't have the intestinal fortitude to eat the second one. But yeah, this one's going in the garbage. But I really and truly do imagine that's what dog food tastes like. Coming back was not bad, as I mentioned. There was no real extreme flooding that I encountered on Interstate 77 or 26. The bad areas apparently are more into the rural areas, of course, of Richland County and Calhoun, but also Orangeburg, and some of the not downtown, but some of the metropolitan areas of Columbia that are not really below sea level, but they're in some of the more hilly terrain that have gotten really washed out conditions right now, and it's going to be continuing for the next couple of days because of the fact that a lot of that water not only fell here, but it fell in the upstate as well, so it's going to be coming this way. Hopefully the drainage systems will be able to handle that. I know part of 601 here in St. Matthews is currently washed out. There's a section near the Fort Mott community that has actually been damaged. I saw a picture that someone had posted on Facebook earlier of what appeared to be a rather large section of the road that's now gone. So whether or not that remaining piece, there was one lane that still seemed to be passable. Whether or not that will be something that can be reopened in the coming days, who knows. Let's talk about the few matches that I did see. I will totally admit that I have not seen the remainder of the results of the card beyond what I did see in person here this evening. Saw 4 matches total. The 4th match was the Tag Team Championship. The first match was what I'm assuming will be an untelevised preliminary match between the Southern Savior John Schuyler and Sean Schultz. Schultz apparently is getting something of a, I don't want to say a tryout or whatnot, but I'm not real familiar with him. He may already be a TNA talent for all I know. But it was impressive to see Schuyler and Schultz out there. They had a very good TV-style match. I think they went about 8 to 10 minutes. I will say this, I know there are a lot of people who criticize Schuyler for one reason or another, but he does what I can only describe as a spit take in a lot of his matches, where he takes a punch or whatnot and just sprays something in the crowd. It gets over every time. It just sells whatever the move is, and it's one of those little subtle things that somebody like him does at an appropriate time in the match that adds a lot to it, especially with him being, this super heel that he's created in the Southern Savior character. The other 3 matches, the first one was the X Division Ultimate X match. That was a lot of fun to watch because those matches are typically a train wreck, and this one was more the same in that regard. What I would like to point out, though, is that 2 things, actually. The match allowed for a lot of opportunities for Andrew Everett in terms of him to get out there and to show what he's got. Of course, he's the native North Carolina boy, like a lot of the Mid-Atlantic people that were there this evening were. He was involved in the final spot of the match to where he and Tigre Uno were ascending the Ultimate X structure there. He actually was walking on the, I don't want to call them ropes, but I guess you'd say cables that are suspended above the ring. He was using the scaffolding, whatever you want to call it, that the structure is based around to sort of support himself, but regardless, it was a tremendous maneuver on his part, and Tigre Uno got up there as well. The only thing about those matches is that they really expose the business to a horrible degree. I enjoy them because they are fun to watch. It's a lot of the flippy stuff, but here again, it's a lot of choreography is what it amounts to. Not to say that there isn't in a wrestling match, period, just to say that with those guys, it really comes across as, okay, we got to plot this out from point A to point B to point C, all the way to, M or N, whatever point they get to in the future with the match there. Well, there was a fairly long interlude between the Ultimate X match and the Bound for Gold Gauntlet match, because they were taking down the scaffolding that was used for the Ultimate X match. It's kind of interesting in how that thing pieces together, because it's one piece that is actually hoisted up into the lighting rig, and the 4 posts that are supporting it on the ground, they're actually unbolted from that top section, and they carry it away. Didn't take them too terribly long to get it finished, but Ethan Carter III, or EC3, whatever you want to call it, he was out delivering a promo in front of the live audience at that point in time while the crew was working on it. I'll point something out while I'm talking about his promo. The speakers from where I was sitting wound up being in front of me, and people in my section were complaining about the fact that you could hear the tone coming from the speakers, but you couldn't tell what people were saying. Between the crowd noise, the music, everything else that was in the arena, you really could not tell what they were saying at all. So it's one of those things that from a production standpoint, you kind of have to wonder, well, why did they put the speakers where they did? It was really because of the fact that they laid out the arena the way they did. They chopped the thing in half to begin with. They only sold half of the arena. Well, they only sold half of the arena. I'll get to that in a moment. But they were hung in such a way that they were in front of the stage, and we were just barely behind them. It was enough to throw off the acoustics that badly. And that was the same no matter who was on the mic. It didn't matter if it was him, Jeremy Borash, Christy Hemme, whoever. It was all bad. So from a production standpoint, we were not in a good way as far as the people that were in my particular section there. This was a half house, if you want to call it that. Tarps were up that limited the view of the staging from roughly half the building all the way across one side, and then you had the actual arena space that was on use for the show. With it being half a building, you would think they'd be able to sell the entire space in terms of the tickets that were available. I don't think they really got anywhere close to having the total space full. Actually, I know that they didn't. Not from a sold standpoint and not from a papered standpoint either, because the sections that were where the hard camera was situated were almost empty. You had several sections that were in the the mirror image of where I was sitting in the venue adjacent to us, who were totally empty for the most part. Some of the sections on the floor were full, but you had rows that weren't totally sold. And in regard to the actual tickets sold and whatnot. I couldn't give you a real number because it was very heavily papered. People who were standing at the box office window within minutes of the show opening, they weren't buying tickets. They were redeeming these vouchers that were presented at various points throughout the community in the past day or so to get free admission into the show. There were a couple hundred people there probably whenever I was standing around or whenever I was coming in, waiting on their opportunity to get their voucher redeemed for a ticket. Makes me feel real good about having spent $20 on a seat, particularly one that was in not so great of a spot, as it turns out. But be that as it may, it's one of those things that happens in wrestling. They would sooner have it look good on TV than it would be, them losing money, because it brings in concessions, it brings in all kinds of other opportunities for them to sell gimmicks as far as t-shirts and whatnot are concerned. So, but still, to see that level of giveaways being handled for a pay-per-view event, especially one that is supposed to be a company's biggest of the year, that's pretty bad. A pretty bad sign there. It just really bugs me that a company that has this much talent, this much going for it technically, can't make any type of headway. It just boggles my mind. The gauntlet match was interesting because of the fact that you had a couple of guys come in who you don't normally see competing anymore. You had Al Snow and also Tommy Dreamer come in. Dreamer was kind of funny in particular whenever he came in because, of course, he's wearing a House of Hardcore t-shirt. So it's become that TNA wrestling is not just a spot for TNA talent to show off their wares. You now have guys who come in and promote their own companies because it's part of the deal that they strike with TNA. Like, hey, you want me to come in? Sure, I'm going to wear my own t-shirt. Or I'm going to talk about my own company here every 5 minutes. It was a passable match. You had a lot of guys involved in there who really had no opportunity to win that match whatsoever. You had guys like Jesse Goddard, who apparently they're calling the Man now. I think he had graduated up from being a part of the bromance to just the Man, so I guess it's a natural evolution there. A couple of guys I'd never really seen before. Some guy they had up there as the Thug. He had a name, but I don't remember what it was. He was taping his fists as he came to the ring. That was kind of cool, but people were saying, is this their Sheamus? Is this who that's supposed to be? A couple of guys that just didn't really do anything for me. It boiled down to towards the end where you had Tyrus, Mr. Anderson, Jesse Goddard. Abyss was not in the match that long. I was kind of surprised by that. But the final two were Tyrus and Mr. Anderson. They had a good series of exchanges there. Match, like I say, was passable. And Tyrus did eventually win. EC3 came out after the match and was talking about how, now we'll take your opportunity at the gold that you won for having been victorious in this match, and we'll go after the tag team titles. And of course, Tyrus then turned on EC3 saying, I'm coming for your belt instead. So that's where they'll be going in the future, I assume, with whatever they have that comes next after this. And the final match that we saw there was the tag team championship match, as I mentioned. It's great to see so many guys from the Mid-Atlantic getting opportunities. Trevor Lee, of course, was in this match. He was reteaming with Brian Myers, his cohort from Global Force Wrestling. The two of them, I really will commend them. They made a good team. It was an entertaining combination. On paper, it looks very odd because they don't seemingly have anything in common other than just a shared interest in winning a championship. But they work well together. Of course, Myers was a tag team specialist when he was in WWE there for a long time. Trevor Lee, of course, is also something of a tag team specialist, as he's won tag team championship out with PWG with Andrew Everett, who was also on this show. But them and the Wolves had a very good match. It was very entertaining. Kind of, I'll go ahead and say, paint by number for tag team matches as far as the dynamic that the Wolves have sort of set up and TNA as a whole, with their style of presentation when it comes to tag team wrestling in this regard. It just follows the same pattern. Of course, a lot of stuff in wrestling follows the same pattern. It's entertaining nonetheless, but once you've seen it a few times, you kind of know what's going to happen. So there was not a whole lot of guessing to this. It was not really expected that Trevor and Brian were going to win the championship again anyway, but it is what it is. We'll go ahead and wrap things up by saying that it was an interesting trip here. All things totaled, I don't regret having gone, but I do kind of wish that I had some method of conveyance that was faster and able to get me from point A to point B without having to spend 3 hours on the road. But it's coming up on 1 a.m. here now. It's now October 5th, 2015. My office is going to be closed tomorrow, so fortunately I don't have to worry about getting up in 5 hours to go get ready for that. But be that as it may, it was a fun time here this evening. Just a little bit weird in terms of the way things broke out and the way things were handled, not only from a weather standpoint, but a show standpoint as well. So, with that said, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I mentioned, this is probably going to be filed under the lost episode of Rasslin with Redbeard, but we do appreciate you watching the program. If you enjoy what we have here on the Rasslin with Redbeard channel, we would ask that you give us a subscription. We are always trying to put new stuff out here, either in the form of midweek updates, match videos, or, of course, the Rasslin with Redbeard main show here that you've been enjoying this evening. Or at some point during the day. Doesn't necessarily have to be this evening. It's this evening now. It's pitch black dark outside. Also, if you would, go ahead and check us out on social media, Twitter, Facebook, all those good things. I don't know where we're going from here as far as the next show that we'll be covering. There's a lot of various indie shows in this area coming up soon, so I'm sure we'll have something that we can pick up on. But regardless, we appreciate you tuning in. Whew. It's time to go to bed. We'll see you down the road.